Hey everybody, Cleo here, and today I'm going over my September wrap-up. So September is the month of Magical Readathon, which is a readathon hosted by G from the channel BookRoast, and in that basically created sort of like fictional character that then goes through like magical training over the years. And so I think it's the third year now, so I think like after next year my character will have graduated. My character is always combining multiple callings, so she is going for Illusionist, Rogue and Rift Architect. Now I almost made it this year, but I do have one book that I still need to finish in the month of October, so I did use a scroll of extension for that. And since most of you here will know that I am doing the challenge of reading all of my books at the same time, I did need to use quite a lot of scrolls of continuation, which meant that I could start the book before the start of the readathon, because a lot of the books that I ended up using for this readathon I had started before the start of the months. So I'm gonna go through this calling by calling, so let me just get my phone out, because there I have tracked like what classes I needed to take for every calling and which books I was counting for all of those prompts. So let's go. Magical Readathon, where are you? Books, Magical Readathon, right? And moving all the way to the bottom. Alright, let's start with the Illusionist Rogue calling. So this is the unofficial calling. This is the one that my character kind of does take the classes for, but you know, she's officially signed up as a Rift Architect, but she's an assassin, so she wants to get some more classes in, and so she's also following the ones for Illusionist Rogue. So first class for Illusionist Rogue is Shape-Shifting, and for that I needed to reach the O mark, so I just had to read one book, and for that I did the jewelry. So I had the prompt of reading a book with jewelry on the cover, and for that I read Deathless by Rob J. Hayes. Deathless is a book in a trilogy of trilogies, so Rob J. Hayes is writing 3 trilogies at the same time, and all 3 trilogies take place at a different point in time within this world, separated by quite some centuries. We have 3 races taken at play here. We have humans, demons and angels, and then we also have God. And regarding depending on which trilogy you're reading, the relationships between these 3 races will be quite different. The book Deathless is the first book in the Annals of the God Eater, which is the 2nd trilogy, and this takes place around the time in which man's attitude towards angels is changing a lot. So angels have basically kind of helped humans escape the clutches of demons in the past, but angels are actually so dominant in the society at this point in time, they're so overpowering that humans are basically living at the whims of the angels, and they don't seem to have or be given or allowed much agency of their own by angels at that point in time. So this one has a crown on the cover, and that is why it is counted for this prompt. I did enjoy this one, but I think with this series, like, the overall experience is the main selling point, the overall experience of reading these 3 books at the same time and seeing these differing attitudes and differing interpretations or versions of past events is what makes this interesting, like a really interesting series and a really interesting experiment to go through. Next up, for Art of Illusion, I had to reach the highest mark, so I had to read 3 books for them. For the O mark, I had a random emoji how do you call that? a random emoji generator generated the set of masks for me. For this one I had like a different book originally in the TBR, but I already knew at that point in time that there was going to be a big chance that I would have to swap it out for something shorter, and so because of the set of masks and its reference to theater, I decided to go for The Importance of Being Earnest, which is a play by Oscar Wilde. I've listened to this play many times, but I do enjoy it a lot. It's a play that deals with kind of like mistaken identity, as there are 2 characters within this book who are going through life as if they are called Ernest for reasons, and then people kind of gets confused about the identity of these characters as a consequence. I like this one a ton. I would actually like to see the real play of it one day, because I've only listened to it on audiobook so far, but I do enjoy this one, and it is a quick read, so it was something. It was one that I chose because I was like, oh, I'm not making it otherwise, so I need to swap out for something shorter. For the Q mark, I needed to read a prequel, and so I finished Runes of Smoke by João F. Silva. This is the prequel to the Smokesmith series, and I gotta say the prequel I didn't enjoy as much as I enjoyed the first book, which I was also sort of like on the fence about. It interested me. I'm not entirely sure that I'm fully sold on that series, but there was enough there to make me go like, okay, I want to give it more of a shot. And then this prequel novella was free, and I don't know, it's just, it didn't really work for me, but that is because it is a prequel novella, so it is already short, and then we're splitting our time between many different characters, and we're barely revisiting these characters, and so it felt very fractured, and as if it felt really surface level. On the other hand, I did enjoy kind of circling back to events through other people's eyes, but all in all, it just kind of felt a little bit flat to me, and maybe if I'd gone through it in one go rather than so splintered now because of this Every Book All at Once project, it could have also landed better, but having such a splintered focused in a short page count and then me spreading it out through so much time probably didn't help it out. And then for the top mark in this class, for the D mark, I needed to read a book with memory in the title, and so I read The Lantern of Lost Memories. Don't know the title of the name of the author. I will have that on the screen. So this is a Japanese, rather short novel. It's very much in vein of stuff like Before the Coffee Gets Cold, so cozy, sort of like slightly speculative fiction. So in this one, we're basically our story's kind of set in the place between life and death. And so there's this guy who's basically sort of guiding people onto the afterlife, and he is basically going through their memories with them and kind of making a selection of those memories that they want to kind of see flash before their eyes before they pass away. This is a collection of 3 short stories. Within the collection hosts 3 of these life stories, and we see very different stories, very different deaths, but also very different reactions to life after that. And there is also sort of like mystery elements through it that is kind of resolved with the final story, which I also enjoyed. I enjoyed this one a ton. I wouldn't say like it's a must-have or anything like that, or like it's a standout in that genre neither, but I definitely think that it was wholesome, cute, exactly what I was looking for, and if you like that type of literature, you're looking for something else to try out in there, I definitely would give it a go. I did enjoy it a lot. And then the final book that I had to read for Illusionist Rogue is the class of Psionics and Divination. I had to get the lowest mark here, so the O mark, for which I had to read a favorite author's debut. Like, there are a few possibilities here, but I definitely didn't want to put Elantris by Brandon Sanderson on here, which is like the one author I've kind of like officially agreed to consider my like favorite author, I guess. But there are multiple authors of which I really enjoy their work, and this one is definitely one, and that is Sayaka Murata. And so I reread Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, which I really enjoyed rereading as well, because since reading Earthlings, I've kind of like, Earthlings is my new favorite Sayaka Murata, and this one kind of falls by the wayside sometimes, and now having reread it, I do like really enjoy this one, to reread it as well. So this is a story about a woman, I think her name is Keiko. So her name is Keiko, she works in a convenience store, she is most likely autistic. I've heard through other people that Sayaka Murata is actually autistic herself, but so she's somebody who is struggling with kind of knowing how to react to people and what people want to hear from her, because if she just reacts the way that she feels like reacting, people often consider that to be weird, and so she's basically enjoying her job working at a convenience store, but people seem to want to steer in a different direction, and because they're like, yeah, a convenience store job is like not a professional, not a a respectable job. It's just like a job you do in between, like when you're just starting out and you're trying to make a path in life for yourself. And so her being happy with the job that she's currently in doesn't really fit in with society and its model of what she should be, what a woman in Japanese society should be doing with her life. And so it's a lot about the struggle between her inner needs, her inner enjoyment of where her life is at the start of this book, and the tension with people's expectations and what people want her to want out of life and what people feel she should be going after in life. So it's a short one, quick read. I really enjoy it a ton. Next up, we go into the Rift Architect calling. So I'll mention the first one, but I won't talk about it because I didn't finish it. So for the first class, Inscription, I had to reach 2 marks. And the first mark I didn't technically reach, but I used the scroll of extension. So so with that scroll, I act as if I have completed it, and that is The Principle of Moments by Esme Jikimi Pearson. So that one I'm currently still reading, have like 100 pages to go into it at this point in time. So I will finish it before the end of October, and then everything will be right as rain. For the second class, the Q mark, I had to read a book with the color in it that appeared on the title of the title of the book had to have the color that came through color wheel. And now I do remember, so it was like bright blue, and so for that one I chose Escape to Willow Cottage. I've forgotten the name of the author. So Escape to Willow Cottage is like, it was originally released in like 4 sort of like, I wouldn't say podcasts, but 4 like seasonal drops, and so Escape to Willow Cottage is now available as like one big story, and it's a story about a woman who escapes London after a abusive relationship with her then partner, and so she escapes to Willow Cottage in the middle of the Cotswolds somewhere, which is a cottage that she like impulsively bid upon in an auction. However, when she arrives, the cottage turns out to not be in such a great state, so she determines to kind of like work it up until the point that she'll be able to sell it again. And when she's there, she meets a very annoying neighbor that we can all guess is going to be the love interest for this series. I enjoyed it. I think it was a wholesome read. It was like, at that point in time, I was still during my commute going through some sort of like wholesome, easy contemporaries to kind of balance out the fantasy of my reading projects. I've since been listening to stuff that is actually on this TBR card, but at that point in time I was still reading other stuff. I might go back to that at a later stage within this project, but at the moment I have a few that I have the audiobook for, so I'll be continuing it like that from now on. The next class that I need to take in order to get to the next level of the Rift Architect calling is Spells and Incantations, for which I needed to reach a top mark, so 3 more books. So for the first one we have the 5-star prediction. For this I read The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons. So Jen Lyons is the author of A Chorus of Dragons, a series that is near and dear to my heart, and so I definitely had high expectations for The Sky on Fire. I will admit that I went into it with not 5-star predictions anymore, just because I had heard some disappointing things by others, but it is a Jen Lyons book, so it's always going to be a 5-star prediction, and I will say that it didn't reach 5-star prediction level for me, so it didn't get to the 5 stars, but I did really enjoy my time with it. I think it is a really fun book to read, but it doesn't have the same sort of like depth and character work that A Chorus of Dragons has. So The Sky on Fire, we are following a girl who was sort of like banished as a young girl because of and now I'm already like semi-hazy on what she supposedly did as a young girl. She got in the bad side of dragons, and she has got like a fearsome reputation for being super evil or something like that, and so she was banished. However, at this point in time, a crew is going out to look for her as they need her help in stealing something from dragons. This is a high story to some extent, but I wouldn't go into it expecting it to be a high story, because in the total page count I would say that very little time is actually spent on the high section of it, but it is really fun. If you've enjoyed a Course of Dragons, I would say you will also enjoy this. It has a lot of elements of a Course of Dragons series, but as indicated earlier, it is much less in-depth. It kind of feels like this could have been elaborated into multiple books, but she wasn't given a 3-book deal or something like that, and so the story feels a little bit too big for the page count that it is given, and so it feels more like a fast-paced, plot-driven story, whereas what I really enjoyed about A Course of Dragon is that combination with good character work as well. And I feel like the character work, there isn't enough groundworks made here to make you care about the characters the way that you did in A Course of Dragons. But it does have similar elements and similar dynamics as A Course of Dragons has, but because of that missing length given to developing these relationships, it doesn't feel as rewarding. Next up, we have the Q mark, for which I needed to read a book that was shown in a video of G from BookRoast, so the originator of Magical Readathon. For this one I chose Will of the Many. This is a book that she showed, I'm sure, in multiple videos, but she definitely showed it in her video of anticipated releases, because there she was mentioning the sequel for this, which will at one point come out. But so The Will of the Many is the first book in the hierarchy by James Islington. James Islington, or Islington, I think you need to pronounce it, but it's always... No, I do... Wait, now I'm doing it correctly, right? Because I was always saying James Islington, but I think it is James Islington, right? Now I'm no longer sure about how to pronounce his name, and which one I was saying and which one is correct and which one isn't. But so, this is the author of the Lycanus trilogy, which I finished earlier this year, right? And I really enjoyed, and that is his sort of like debut series, and this is sort of like his new series, new world, new characters. We are following a boy who he was a prince of a kingdom that was basically overrun by the empire, the hierarchy, and so he has now basically just been like going about his life, trying to survive, trying to make sure that nobody realizes who he was, and so he's just trying to get by and keep a low profile in order to go ahead and I think he has certain plans for where he wants his life to go, but he's definitely not sort of on like a revenge path. I think his plans ultimately want to see him leave the hierarchy, because in the hierarchy there's basically this sort of like power distribution system where the person at the top kind of gets his power from the people below him, and then those people get power from those below him, you know, and it's like the bottom of the barrel gives power to, like, feeds into the power of this pyramid scheme, right? And when you reach a certain age, you basically have to start feeding power to others. And our protagonist basically has never had to do that. You can also kind of volunteer already at an earlier age, but he never has had to do that. And so he is basically trying to find a way in which he would never have to feed power. But when he's doing like his job of working in a prison, he accidentally kind of shows his potential, and the person who was there at that point in time kind of takes an interest in him and wants to train him up so that he can infiltrate into the magical academy and spy on the inside there, because this person's brother died in the academy and he thinks that the sort of like headmaster of the school had something to do with it, and he cannot prove it, so he needs him to infiltrate into this magical school and find the answers. Now, this has been sold many times as a magic school story, and it is but it takes a very long time to get there. So be wary of that, like I think more or less halfway through the book or something is only when we're going to go to that magical school, and that is when the pacing definitely took up a lot for me, because I will say that it was a struggle in the beginning for me. I feel like the first 100, maybe even 200 pages definitely were difficult for me to keep at it, because especially the time in which he's being trained for this magical school time, so all that section for me was really like a struggle to get through, but it definitely picked up a ton. By the end of it I was definitely eating it up, I was definitely entirely engrossed, really enjoyed this book a ton, really enjoyed the mystery that we're laying there at the end as well, and so I'm definitely looking forward to pick it up again, but know that it is slow to start off with, and so if you are struggling with the beginning but you are looking forward to like the magic school parts, know that it is possible that, like me, when you get to the magic school part it'll start to really, really work well for you, and that, you know, if you're struggling a little bit with the part before that for me at least, it really took off in that section. But so yeah, that one definitely really looking forward to continuing on with the series and seeing what my thoughts are for the rest of it. And I'm actually really already looking forward to rereading it for that time, because I do definitely think that I am going to be rereading it to have like my memory fresh about it the moment in which I dive into the next one. And then for the D mark in Spells and Incantations, I needed to steal a book from somebody else's TBR. This is a book that I can potentially steal from like 20,000 people who took part in Magical Readathon. I'm especially stealing it from Elena because she was also going to be reading this one, and I think Barbora also read it, so I could also have stolen it from hers. And that is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. So this is the July Illumicrate book. This is a book about a girl in a magical zoo. She's taking care of the phoenixes there. Phoenixes have really are very close to extinction, and there's this program near her where there are phoenixes, but they and like the little phoenix chicks are basically stolen, and so that's a huge setback for the program, and she is starting a initiative to try and get this program moved to her zoo. This to me is just a little bit too lengthy. I feel like this could have used a little bit of editing, because especially the first half of it I feel like was drawn out to some extent. I do think it may potentially benefits a lot from that early groundwork towards the end, but I was definitely feeling a little bit impatient with it a few times throughout that first section of it. Throughout like the first half, it definitely takes its time compared to what I was saying earlier about The Sky on Fire. This definitely takes its time to develop characters, to set groundworks, and then kind of slowly change dynamics or see characters grow and relationships change. But yeah, I do think I did enjoy it. I do think it's a good one, but I would say that it could have used just a little bit more editing, just edited it down a little bit. Next up, the final class that I had to take is the class of Conjuration, in which I needed to reach the Q mark, so 2 books that I had to read in that one. The first one is a book with a bat on the cover, for which I read The Silverblood Promise, which I adore. I want book 2. First of all, gorgeous cover. This is the most gorgeous cover ever. I mean, I love this cover, and I've seen the cover for book 2 and it looks amazing as well. I will definitely be getting this gorgeous broken binding edition for the sequel as well, because hallelujah. And I'm so happy that the content absolutely matches my excitement for the cover, because that would have really sucked, and especially because this has a murder mystery premise, but I would say it doesn't have much of that murder mystery focus. So in this one we're looking at a guy who basically at a young age he disappointed his father by entering into a duel while he was at the academy, and somebody got killed in the process, and as a consequence he dropped out of school. He is now kind of basically spoiling his life by just like drinking and gambling all of the time, until such a time as the steward of his father's household finds him and tells him that his father has been murdered. And his father left him a note behind on which there are 3 words mentioned. One of them is a location, the second one is the name of a person. And so he goes off to this city to try and locate that person. However, it turns out that she has just been put to prison because she is accused of having killed like somebody really high up, and a huge like sort of like conspiracy is broiling in the city, and he's trying to figure out what happened. This is very action packed, but without the sacrificing character work. Though I would definitely say it's much more plot focused than character focused, so typically not really what I enjoy, but this one I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the fast-paced plot work, though I probably should take that back, because probably this isn't fast-paced for somebody who likes fast-paced reading, but for me it felt quite fast-paced. It felt like we were moving from one action scene to another action scene. Something was constantly happening, and the world building is also pretty interesting. There is some sort of a, what are they called? I think they're called primordials, which are sort of like mysterious beings from the past that we don't really know much about, and we will find out more throughout this book. And the ending as well for this one is like, oh, need book 2, give it to me. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one a whole ton, and I'm so eager to read book 2 and see if I enjoy it as much. But that brings us to the final book for this wrap-up, and I'm gonna have to take a break because I'm doing sprints and I hear that the sprint is over and it's time for a break. So I'm coming back to you guys. Alright, so we are back here. So the last thing I read was A Memory Called Empire by Arkady something, and so this is a fantasy book, right? I'm always confused by this because I feel like this cover looks so sci-fi for me, but I think it's existential crisis. I'm like, wait, what did I read? So, A Memory Called Empire, it's sci-fi, yeah. A Memory Called Empire is a book in which we have an intergalactic empire. Then we have a planet that is not part of the empire, but it's in like, because of how strong the empire is, there are of course diplomatic relationships going on between this planet and that empire. They aren't like a total war or anything like that. There is a sort of like stalemate between the two of them, but the ambassador for this planet has just passed away, and so our protagonist is the new ambassador to this empire. They have this sort of technology that the empire is not aware of, where they can have the consciousness of, they have this sort of like memory system that basically they can kind of mesh with. And this is sort of like something that is implanted in their brain, and so they kind of mesh with that one. And so she became the new ambassador because she is very compatible with this memory system that the previous ambassador was using. However, the memory system that the ambassador hadn't really been back to the planet for like over 10 years, and so he hadn't been able to back up this memory system for that long time. So the memory system that she has implanted is the version of this ambassador from 10 years ago, and they are now going to this planet into a situation that they don't really know anything about. Actually, before going there, she doesn't even know that the ambassador has been found dead. She just knows that they like urgently request a new ambassador. And so she kind of goes into a situation knowing nothing about what the previous ambassador has been going through in the past 10 years, the deals that they've been making throughout the past 10 years, the relationships between him and the people there. And so that's what they're kind of going to be uncovering throughout this book. For me, I'm so sad to say, but I didn't like it. Like I know many people love it, and the audiobook is potentially the cause for me not liking it all that much, because the audiobook definitely was confusing at first, and when I mentioned that in a Discord, they were saying like, yeah, I've heard that this audiobook isn't the best way to go through this book. And so potentially that is the case, because I definitely found it really confusing, because the citizens of the Empire, their names are all sort of like, you know, I've already forgotten them, but like Tenazalia, I think, is one of the names. So it's like a number and then an object. And some numbers like recur, because I think the shorter the number, the more sort of like prestige is linked to it. So, you know, it's not like there's only going to be one character that has the number 3 in it, for example. It's potential for there to be multiple characters like that. And so I was finding it more and more difficult as we got further along to kind of remember who they were talking about when they mentioned certain names. So I definitely feel like I wasn't fully like capturing all of the information in it, and I would blame this project for it, except for the fact that there are definitely a lot of books in which I didn't have that issue all that much, but I do also have a visual memory, and so not being able to see the names can definitely also have impacted my recollection of them. But aside from that, I found like it was just too easy for my memory, for my conscious to kind of drift while going through this, and I wasn't really engaged in any of it. So is it just an audiobook case, or was it just in general that this just didn't flow all that well? Because there are a lot of times in which I was really making an effort, really trying to pay more attention, and that it just didn't really work for me. And that can just really be down to the writing as well. There are definitely certain writing styles that work for a ton of people that don't work for me. And the people who I know I really love this book tend to be able to deal with that writing style much better than I can. So potentially it is that, but I, in principle, cannot really say much about this book because I'm afraid I zoned out for much of it. So, will I ever give this book another chance? Potentially. Are there too many books in my sort of like want to read thing for me to be able to say that I will do that? Yes, so I don't know whether I will ever give it another shot. More likely, if there's another book series coming out by this author, I might give it a tentative go, and then if I find myself liking that one more, go back to A Memory Called Empire and giving it its fair shots in written form. But so yeah, that should be everything I read. I don't think I read anything that didn't count for Magical Readathon, but I will kind of just check that in Storygraph just to be sure. But as far as I'm aware, nothing, like no reading attention or like no book got finished in any case that wasn't part of Magical Readathon, because I definitely did also read some books that weren't part of it, but I didn't finish those normally. So 12 books, did I talk about 12 books here just now? So yeah. I also DNF'd the book, so this one goes into this list as well. So I DNF'd The Waking Fire by Anthony Ryan, first book in the Chronis Memoria series, and that is the same sort of deal as what happened with A Memory Called Empire. And that is also a book that I read in audiobook form, even though I do have the physical one for this. So potentially it really is the audiobooks that have been being problematic for me, which is also why I switched to having, like, why I wanted to read more like light-hearted stuff on the commute, because I was feeling like audiobooks for fantasy and stuff like that weren't always hitting. So it could be that, but I did, with this particular one, with The Waking Fire, there are certain chapters that I re-listened to multiple times. There are certain chapters I really listened to while reading alongside it. And I think my problem with this one is that I feel like we were constantly switching from character to character, and while I enjoyed the chapters in the moment, every single time we would go back to one of these perspectives like 3 chapters further along, we would go back to the storyline of one of the characters, I would feel lost. Each and every time I would need like 10 minutes or so to be like, where are we? What's happening? What happened in the last chapter that I had from this perspective? So nothing was really sticking when it came to this book. And so I enjoyed it in the moment. I enjoyed the chapters in the moment, but somehow it felt super fragmentary because of that sort of like feeling of being lost every single time that I started a chapter. So is this also down to the audiobook? Potentially. But I definitely wouldn't say that I enjoyed any chapter so much that I was like, oh yeah, I should just restart and read it physically, because there's huge potential going lost here. So I enjoyed the chapters in the moment, but not to the extent that I was like, ooh, hooked. And so when I don't even know how far along I was specifically into the book, when I was just like, you know what, this is not working for me, and I don't think that if I went through this physically, I would have a much better experience. So I DNF'd that one. But so yeah, that is all that I read throughout the month. The numbers, I didn't even say it at the beginning, but so I don't know at what point I started the month. I actually filmed my August wrap-up recently, so I should actually know this, right? I don't know. I know that I started that month with like 15, right? And it stayed more or less the same, but then I also bought books, so I added to it, but I don't actually remember what it ended up with. But so this is the number that we ended September with, which should be the same as it is right now actually. So not really exactly, because I got a new book as well. So where are you? Physical TBR. I haven't finished the book yet in October, and my TBR right now minus that book, so it should be, I ended the month at 17. So still too many books, still want to get that down, but I am very happy that we are close to going back under 15, which would be lovely, especially considering how close we are to the end of the year and my hope of being at 0 at the end of the year, because yeah, that's still quite a lot of books, but I am also reading in all of these books, which is a difference, whereas when before I would be like, oh, I still need to read like 15 books in let's say 2 months time, then that's a ton of books, because I typically tend to read other stuff as well. I mean, it's possible, but at this point in time I'm like, whoa, that's a lot, but also I should realize that I'm a third of the way into all of those books, so looking better. But we're not talking about current moment, we're talking about September. So in any case, I left September with 17 books left on the TBR, 17 books for 3 months progress, 2.5 to be fair. Still doable, we'll see. But yeah, I'll keep you posted. Every week I post an edition of Every Book All at Once, where you can see my weekly challenge and how well I do. And yeah, I'm hoping to come to you guys with the October wrap up a little bit closer in the month of November than I did for the September wrap up. But so yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys for the next one. Bye!